Welcome everyone to our webinar, Small Businesses, Big Impact, Prioritizing Mental Health for Growth and Prosperity. My name is Ana Juk, and I'm the Marketing Director at the Spain US Chamber of Commerce. Thank you all very much for joining us and showing interested in a topic that I believe is incredibly relevant, especially in the aftermath of COVID-19, which has brought much needed attention to our mental health. Today's goal is to discuss mental health with a focus on business strategies and how this factor can affect the workplace and the growth of small businesses. We will explore this and what we can do to invest in improving this work condition to prevent negative consequences. And I'm really happy today because we are fortunate enough to have Malu Campanico with us today. With 20 years of executive experience in the pharmaceutical industry across America, Latin America, and Europe, Malu works as a therapist at Sanita's Medical Center, specializing in trauma, anxiety, and burnout. Her experience can offer us great insights into fostering mental health and resilience in the workplace. And I'm sure we are going to learn a great deal, so welcome, Malu.
Thank you.
And just before we start the session, I wanted to introduce to Sanitas. For those who don't know, Sanitas is a healthcare organization with roots in Colombia that has expanded its personalized care approach into the United States through a strategic alliance with GuideWell and Florida Blue. Sanitas has a significant presence in both Florida and Connecticut, providing high-quality healthcare services through their patient-centered facilities. Malu will also be able to tell you more about this at the end of the presentation. And also, before we start the session, I want to remind you that after this talk, we will open a Q&A session where Malu will be answering your question directly. So you can use the chat to submit your questions. Please take advantage of her expertise and the time that we have today because it can be incredibly helpful. And also for those who wish to watch the webinar again, it will be available on our YouTube channel along with other webinars. And if you want to see other upcoming webinars, please visit our website in Spain US Chamber of Commerce. And now, without further ado, I will hand it over to our dear Malu, who I'm very excited to hear from, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the warm welcome. I felt like, wow, it sounded really interesting. So as you said, I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but basically you nailed it. What we're going to try to see is talk about mental health with a business perspective in order for us to gain a strategic advantage. So usually we talk about mental health like a separate thing. So now let's make it a business discussion. And this presentation is a collaboration between the Sanitas group and the Florida Blue group, right? I'm not going to spend time over that because Anna was wonderful at explaining it. So let's see how this is going to look like. So the first 30 minutes or so, I'm going to give you foundational concepts, ideas to kind of put the whole mental health into the mindset of business. Where are we right now with that? Then we were going to move of how does that look for you? How can you identify in your workplace of what we usually call key red flags that tells you, yeah, I may have a problem. And then finally, we will spend the last portion of the foundational concepts on what can we do about it? Some of the best practices, what can we do in our own business, despite the size of our business, right? So let's jump into numbers. So this is really recent data. Most of it is only 2 years old. So it's shocking, but it is costing the US 3.7 trillion a year mental health. That is the economic burden that it has on business alone, right? And that combination, that number was the combination of working time, people not going to work, then the turnover, the cost of turnover because of mental health issues, and then healthcare costs. And in that you have the actual services plus prescription. In fact, Gallup did a study with that was published in 2022, so I'm guessing that the data was 2021, where they only measured the days that people didn't go to work because of mental health issue. And it was calculated that employees with mental health concerns take at least 12 days of non-program or not planned days off versus their colleagues that only take 2.5. And that is costing the US economy $48 billion a year. And in Europe, it doesn't look that much brighter either, because the latest information about these numbers is calculating the mental health direct cost, not the associated cost of all the people around you, your family, all of the associated costs with mental health issues is costing 4% of the GDP, which is $600 billion euros. So let's talk now, nailed it, to how does look in the workplace. So 1 in every 5 Americans are suffering from a mental health issue. Out of that, primarily anxiety is the one that is taking the biggest toll out of everyone's mental health. And that number is actually meaning that 1 in 5 is taking an average. But if we only concentrated on the younger generation, it gets up to 34% of the people are declaring that they have a mental health issue. So that means for that younger workforce, it means that they take at least 1 day a week, because the stress of financial pressures doesn't let them fully be at work, right? And in the C-suite, which will think, well, the C-suite, I mean, CFO, COO, CEOs, they might be more grounded, they might be more relaxed. Actually not. It takes them at least 17 hours that they have to take off of a work week because of the pressure of the work or some mental health concerns, right? So what are the kind of mental health diagnoses that we mostly see associated with work pressure? We have depression, which I think is kind of familiar. We tend to associate depression with sadness, but in reality, sadness is just one of the symptoms of depression, because depression is a seriously lack of vitality. It's kind of like someone took your energy and sucked it out. That's kind of how it feels, depression. And sadness is one of those, right? It's so impactful in the business that the American Psychiatric Association came up with a depression calculator. You have the link for that at the end of the presentation, where you can actually see how much is costing your business the weight of having depression, or some employees that are really depressed. Then you have anxiety, and I think this is the one that we can relate the most with. And in that, I'm gonna spend a little bit more time with burned out, because it has become one of those key words for business, kind of like at some, I don't know, 10 years ago, it was synergy. Everybody was talking about synergy. I think now it has shifted to talk about burned out. How much do you have? How much I have? Everyone in my office is burned out, right? And then we have the other two that are very popular, that are work related, is adjustment disorders, that are what happened after a traumatic event and how your brain processes that traumatic event. And then substance abuse, which is mostly used to cope with emotions, right? So since they really explained to me that this was a business talk and not a mental health talk, I'm not going to explain a lot about each of these diagnoses, but let's just give you an overview on the top two. And it's funny because this actual quote is 3,000 years old. So I don't think that we have changed that much. But Lao Tzu said, depression is an over concern about the past, while anxiety is an over concern about the future. But in the present, you don't experience either of those. And I think that that gives us a global overview about the top two that you will see in your workplace, which will be depression and anxiety. So because of how prevalent it is for business anxiety, and because of the burnt out, that is the only one that I'm going to dedicate a little bit more time in this presentation, right? So let's talk about this curve that I hope that those of you that had ever asked for help because you were stressed out, And by mean help, I say like a therapist, a psychology, they had a chance to explain it to you, because this explains a lot of how we feel at work. This is the relation between the productivity, your performance, and the level of stress. So this actual chart is an adaptation of the Jerkson-Dawson's law. So actually it became a law. It was first published in 1908. So as I said, we haven't changed that much, I guess. So if you have very little stress, let's say you are very chill, you actually are not going to produce a lot of stuff. You are not going to be productive. So that will be the beginning of that green area. So a little bit of stress or very few stress is not very useful for you. So when someone comes to my office and says, I don't want to have a stress, I always kind of correct them. You don't want to have a lot of it, but you want to have some, because the stress, and I'm using stress, anxiety, and arousal as synonym for explaining this chart. But a little bit of stress is going to be not that productive. As you keep adding stress, so think about stress as energy. As you keep adding stress and you're going up in that curve, you start to become more productive and more productive. As soon as you get to that yellow, that is your optimal level of stress. Those are those days that you are like, wow, today I nailed it. I was like on it. I was trying to finish this task for a month, and today I have so much energy. That is your optimal level of stress, where you are extremely productive and everything is kind of aligning. The problem is, as you keep adding stress to the system, there is a clear tipping point, which is the beginning of that orange space. So in that orange space, now you're waking up and you're already tired. And you're like, how is this possible? Why am I already fatigued? So now it will require, because your productivity or your performance has gone down, it requires of you expending double the energy to get something accomplished. So even washing the dishes becomes like, oh my God, I need to wash the dishes, because your productivity is going down. So now you require more and more energy. As you keep adding energy to the system, you get to that red area where it's like you really are in anxiety and burnt out. So it is so much, you need so much energy to do what you need to do that you have no productivity. If you keep adding stress to the system, so beyond this chart, let's just say at the end of the chart, there is the area that I call the frozen area, where you have so much stress because you need to do something that you are not able to do so. So you becoming kind of like this repetitive cycle, which is when I need to defrost you. What I usually call my patients, I need to defrost them, right? That is the point when that is so much stress that you cannot do what you need to be doing. And that is kind of how burnt out starts to feel like. So, and you will be wondering, why is she talking about all this? And I think burnt out will be the perfect space for me to say a little bit of why they asked me to do this talk. So as Anna brilliantly explained it, I was in the pharma executive for 20 years. I was traveling all over the place. I loved it. I was in the anesthesia field, and then I moved to the neurology field, saving brains in ICU situations. Wonderful. And I got massively burnt out. So I felt like it was me, that I was not handling the anxiety as I should, that there was something that I could be doing different, and that there was something that I was missing, because I see other people doing it, and why was I not be able? Why everything was so overwhelming all the time? So that led to a lot of exploration and a massive career change. So now I'm a psychotherapist. So the reason why, I guess one of that they asked me to talk about this is because I have felt it from both sides of the couch. I was on that side of the couch, and now I'm in this side of the couch. So the difference between anxiety and burnt out is that anxiety, yes, there are some within your control, but burnt out is a systemic problem, meaning there are systems at work that are not functioning, and the expectations and the boundaries are not clearly defined. And because there is like this constant race against the clock, because everything is up in the air, generates this sense of burnt out. So that is different from anxiety. Anxiety is alert systems that are going up because of the perceived threat and how your brain is trying to process stress, which, by the way, stress doesn't exist. It's an interpretation of something that you expected to be different. But that will be another talk on its own. So that is why burnt out, if you have one employee that is telling you that they are burnt out, you probably have a bigger problem at work because it's a systemic condition. It's not, anxiety is not, but burnt out is, right? So let's talk about how much that's costing you. So the quality of your work is going to go down 2.5% if you are feeling under the burnt out. And this has been like publications of multiple studies to come up with that number. Also, 42% of the people globally, and these are unskilled workers, like and they included C-suite, HR, and like top employees and skilled employees only. The same thing with 91%. That study was done on skilled workers alone. And 2/3 of the workforce say that their work impacts negatively their mental health, like they get more stressed out or anxious because of their work. So how can you identify it at work? What are those red flags that says like, do I really have people being suffering from this at work? There are a few that are key. Sudden changes in mood are absolutely key that something is going on. If you have someone that was very cheery and happy, or they were saying good morning, good afternoon, they start not to say it, check out. Check out, because those are the initial changes, the initial cues that something is going on. Obviously, your work rate, now it becomes very difficult for you to make a decision to focus on something, so they will ask for you to repeat it. So you see this person that says that, can you send it to me in writing? Can you repeat it? Or they go back and they say, you said something, but I forgot what it was. Those are starting to be cues because your hippocampus is getting compromised when there is too much stress, right? Anxious, fidgeting, someone that becomes very cynical. Believe it or not, cynicism, unless it's like a trait that they admire, and very few people do, cynicism tells you that there is something that they're very not okay with. And that could also be a cue. Let's explore what's going on with the well-being of this person. Headaches and absenteeism and presenteeism. So absenteeism is clearly the person is not going to work, which is part of what those numbers at the beginning. Those numbers at the beginning, all three consider people not actually attending their work. What happened with presenteeism? There are studies that are calculating that is 10 times more costly presenteeism. Presenteeism means you are going to work, but not really performing because your productivity is down. So you are going, but not really doing what you're supposed to be doing, right? So how can we change it? So now we are leading back to that third part of the overview. How can we change it? There needs to be a change in the culture of well-being. What do I mean by that? Everything that we consider, if I ask all of you, if I could see your faces and I could ask you, what do you think about, describe something about well-being, you are all going to mention things that you do when you're not working. Oh, it's relaxing, it's going on vacations, it's spending time with my family. But unfortunately, or fortunately, we do spend a lot of our time at work. So there has to be some components about the work that are not going to be negatively impacting how we perceive well-being, right? So there has, and I think, by the way, and we can talk about it on the Q&A, I think AI is going to disrupt a lot of things, but it might give us some inputs on this aspect, which is the moving from output to outcome. It's not how much I'm doing in a certain time, because that's unlimited, but how good is what I'm producing, or how great is what I'm doing. That switch starts to become more manageable for the human brain, right? So there is this study which I thought was fantastic because it was very applicable, of this professor from Netherlands. I'm not going to try to pronounce or mispronounce his last name, but I think Van Rehen, I would say, but it's on the bottom of the presentation, of the slide on the presentation, that he said the key to get someone out of the stress in a workplace, right? Out of the stress into a well-being is enthusiasm. And there were three components that he said are key for enthusiasm, because the difference about being engaged or being participant and all of that is that enthusiasm comes from inside out. I cannot give you enthusiasm, but I create the conditions for you to be enthusiastic about your job. And he said that they were very basic, that there were three key elements that need to happen for you to feel enthusiastic about your work. First is that you use your competencies. So you are using what you're good at. So you are not underutilized, but also you're being challenged. Either you are creating new skills, or they are investing in you for creating new skills, or they put you into a thing because they recognize that you're very good at it. The second one is autonomous, and this is going to become, and we will see it later on in some of the practices, this is a key point, especially after COVID, is how much of your work, and that includes your schedule, do you have control on? If you feel like you have some flexible time, you also feel like more enthusiastic about your job because you have some flexibility. And the third one, which is the most studied one, is do I feel connected? Am I getting compliments? Am I getting recognitions? Are they truthful? It's not like, oh, thank you. And by the way, in here is key that you, like, if someone compliments your work, and this is something about the brain, of the gratitude, of how it works in the brain to release oxytocin. If you said, oh my God, that was a great work, that was awesome, you did it great, and your reply is, it was a team effort, or it was nothing, or no problem, you shut it down, so you create no oxytocin. So that compliment has to be, and the appreciation has to be personal and felt, right? So how do you know if someone is enthusiastic in a workplace? And one of the key aspects of it is that check how many things that person does that are outside of their job description. And that is the key to find if you do have some enthusiastic employees in your staff. And once you got one, grab it, because they could be contagious. Enthusiastic employees are contagious energy within an office, because once a person is disengaged, if they're angry, you can still salvage them. But if they're disengaged, it's going to be very hard for you to salvage them in moving them into enthusiastic. So well-being has so many aspects. By the way, I should have said this before. I tend to speak very fast because I will try to cover a lot. So if you are not getting something, please let me know so I will slow down. I don't know if, yes, I do have access to the chat, right? Okay, so well-being. There are multiple aspects of well-being. Mental health obviously is the one that we're going to concentrate today, but there is this is only 8. Everybody defines it in different ways. There are people that says 5 spectrums. There are people that say 8. These are the 8 main components of well-being, and all of them are going to be playing a role within your mental health. And do not underestimate the connection between health, physical health, and mental health. One of the projects about moving them up, and we will see some of the evidence and some of what other people have done, has a tremendous effect on your mental health, and the other way around. Better mental health is definitely impacting your physical state. Flexible hours are going to be key. And then what are your benefits? If you have benefits, over communicate them, because most of people don't even know that they have those benefits. So if you have them, over communicate them, and especially include something benefits about giving them tools to manage their finances. And now let's talk specifically about what we can do on this mental aspect of well-being, right? Wait, there we are. So these are some initiatives. These are like 4 of the key elements of any successful mental health training. The three ones, like the actual training, these are the three that have been most studied with more evidence base, that had the most results, positive results. And gratitude recognition, we talked a little bit about the beginning. Even that means creating systems and that will recognize good work, that will communicate them where they feel the appreciation of their contribution to the company, right? Resilience training. Resilience, the gratitude, by the way, is the one that gives you the most bang for your bucks. Like the most return on investments always are going to be gratitude trainings. Anything that you can do in that spectrum is the one that seems to have the fastest effects, and at the fastest and the best effects on your mental health, work-wise, right? Then let's go to resilient trainings. Resilient training, resilient is that capacity that when something bad happens to you, you bounce back, right? So something happened to you, you dip down, and then you get back to it. That's resilience. So resilience trainings usually makes you gives you tools on how you can manage stress, because as I said, stress is just the expectation and how your brain process an input. It doesn't mean that that stress exists. It's how do you were expecting that to be different, or how much space in your brain did you have for the distress tolerance. So the moment that we work with that, increasing your resilience and helping you with that, now it's not that we are not going to have problems, it's that you will leave a space for other parts of your brain to process those problems. Okay. And actually there is something even better that we can measure with as an assessment, that is, people sometimes get better not because they had, despite of having the problem, but because they had the problem. So it's like resilient 2.0, right? So you go down and then you don't go back to where you were, but you get better because of the problem. And that is called post-traumatic growth index, and you actually can measure. So that also gives you tools to manage difficult situations, and that obviously is going to increase mental health in that space. And meditation, by far, absolutely, without a doubt, is extremely useful and require a space for your brain to just be in the present. And in that, I actually have a personal story about this. I have a friend that he works in a very recognizable pharmaceutical industry in Middle East, and he got really into yoga. He was really good at it. He got like certifications. He loved it. That was a side thing that he was doing. And one day he asked top exec if he could have yoga breaks. So they gave him this space, they bought the mats, and he was doing it. It becomes so successful that now he had to train other managers within the Middle East for this massive pharmaceutical is creating yoga breaks for the employees because of how successful that was. The other aspect that any initiative that you're going to do for mental health has to have is clear and frequent communications, and that will be with your manager. KPMG in their program included what they call the energy check-in. So it's a list of questions that your manager is going to ask. How is your family? How is your finance? How are you sleeping? Just to see where your energy is at and to see what areas of mental health they can help you with. Also, free access to health and wellness resources. That's a given. Like if you want to help your employees, don't make it complicated for them to get this access. So there are specific programs and there are resources that will be available for your company depending on your size. This is a whole industry now. There is a whole industry from Deloitte, Gallup, Lira, all of them are in that space of creating specific wellness resources for your company. And then actual services, right? Videos or in-person services with therapists, coaches, whatever you, depending on your needs, right? So who should be implementing these initiatives? Your managers. Your managers are by far the most effective way of getting into improve these numbers. Why? Because 91% of your managers recognize that they have an impact on their employees. In fact, 4 out of 10 people said that their managers has a negative or extremely negative impact on their mental health. So your manager is the one that can sense the pulse in the room. So think about this. If someone gets like they break a leg randomly, like they're walking, they break a leg, I'm pretty sure that your manager will know what to do. They will call 911, they will know the steps, the SOPs for that specific crisis. What happens if your manager is walking by and he sees one of the cubicles and one of the employees goes and out of the sudden puts their hands in their face and starts sobbing? I'm not sure that that poor manager will know what to do. Probably is going to be very silent in getting into their office because they do have the impact, but they don't have the tools to help people with mental health, right? And here is where surveys are going to be key for the implementation. I know that this was a specific requirement from the team, and to include them. So wellness surveys are awesome at this stage of the game because they will give you a lot of information on what areas to tackle, but they don't give you actionable things. So surveys are good to collect information as long as they come with something that you're going to be doing. Because if you're asking me, are you stressed? Are you sleeping well? Are you all of this? And then nothing happens with that information, now I'm going to get even more frustrated because why did you ask? Why did you pretend to care if you did nothing about it, right? So top considerations, and I know that we're already over the 30 minutes, so I think we have only 2 more slides left. So top considerations, things that hard work in the mental health space for creating wellness programs. One is absolutely get it tailored. If you can get it tailored, that's a no-brainer. Get an associate or a consultant that will come, will check your space, and will determine which ones will be the best tools to use for your specific dynamic at work. The second thing, and this is where I may talk a little bit about the combination between Florida Blue and how the association between Florida Blue and Sanitas. So do not underestimate the power that mental health has over your physical health and the other way around. So the way that we work, all the members for Florida Blue have access to our service in Sanitas. And within that service, when they're going to the PCP saying, oh my God, my blood sugar is high, my pressure is, my heart pressure is up, I'm feeling like I cannot breathe, and they keep coming, then the doctor will point them out and says like, maybe you just need to talk about these symptoms because in mine, all your results are coming up great, and they will send it to us, right? And in that moment, it's wonderful to see how once they start to work on the anxiety or the depression or whatever was the underlying mental health concern, all of their physical health get better. Like they get out of medications, they don't have to go to the ER that many times. They feel, one of the key things, they start to feel very creative. Because once we tackle that, usually that part of the brain that was always under stress gets dumbed down or quiet down, and it allows you to get very creative and very productive. So a combination of mental and physical health has to happen for the programs to work. One initiative that is very easy to do and not that expensive, and it has shown that people really appreciate it. Change all the snacks that you have in the office for fruits and vegetables and organic stuff. The moment that the employees feel that you care about their health, that also helps. Also include the family of the employee, like initiatives that you have for groups and all of that, because the family is the other aspect of that employee's life. If you also have opportunities when they can share with their family and with their coworkers, that helps for the mental health and for feeling part of something. Add to any mental health program finance guidance. Help them how to recognize how to manage their own finances, because finance concerns have a big impact on mental health. Finally, make it obviously part of your goals. If you are going to invest and you're going to take the time to improve the mental health at your workplace, make sure that you have a way to measure it. Otherwise, it's just a good wish, but not a goal, because you have no way to measure outcome. And also, and this is a personal point, Sometimes people jump into programs. They get into wellness programs and they become huge wellness programs. You even create this new position of general manager of human sustainability, that's called, right? So you create these huge programs and you don't see, like, it doesn't seem that they are that effective because most of the time pilots tend to work better. So you create this great idea, you institutionalize it in one portion of the company, and then seeing what worked and what didn't work, you move them into actual programs, right? I kept this line towards the end because this was very shocking because it was put that mental illness is going to be more than cancer, diabetes, and respiratory ailments. The reason why I kept it, and I kept the date, is because the director of the US portion of the National Institute for the World Health Organization said that in 2015. Do you guys don't think that after 2015, especially after 2020, a lot of more things happened to our mental health? So if that was a problem in 2015, imagine how much of a problem is now. So should you invest? Should you go into spending the money to make this happen? Absolutely yes. So there has been calculations. So Forbes published this interesting numbers where it says that every spending in mental health reduced the company expenditure of $2,300 per person in what they will be paying in healthcare related expenses. So in that healthcare, once again, is healthcare and medications. So it will reduce presenteeism notably. Also, you will keep more of your employees, and we all know how expensive is turnover. For every dollar, you get $4 back in health and productivity that you invest in mental health, obviously. And also, for every dollar, the World Bank says that you get from 3 to 5 in social and economic gains. And the last aspect, which is very, very important, there is this whole new discussion about being a measurement of your company's future value. Why? Because if there is a lot of stress or distress, or there isn't a good level of well-being in the company, you are not going to be productive because your creativity and all of those aspects gets shut down. Your brain starts to work in this survival mode. Because of it, if you start to measure the quality of the mental health of your workplace, it's very easy to see if you can sustain this level of growth and creativity because of the quality of the mental state of the people that work there. So Gallup calls it net thriving, and they are kind of getting a number that would tell me, should I invest in this company based on what I can see now, or the potential to keep going with this much growth and creativity and expansion and all that. So that's what I got. These are the numbers, and thank you so much for all the time, and thank you for the Spanish Chamber of Commerce for inviting me. That was very kind, and now I'm open to any questions, hopefully that I will be able to answer.
Thank you so much, Malu, for your presentation. That was very interesting. I see that we already have some questioning here, but before we get to them, I wanted to mention that if you're interested in visiting the Florida Blue offices, you can contact them using the emails provided on the thank you slide that you just saw. Malu, I wanted just to remember that. And moving into the question, we have a few. The first question, which has been asked like repeatedly, and you briefly mentioned AI in your presentation, but they wanted to get you more deeply in this, is like, could you elaborate more on the potential impact of AI in the field of mental health and how these technologies can specifically contribute to improving mental health care?
Sure. So AI is new for all of us. So I'm going to start with the bad and then the good. So AI is going to, I see it right now. By the way, I consume AI. So I'm guilty. I consume it. I think it's fantastic. Actually, I was trying to explain it to someone and I said, you know, when you got your first cell phone that you said like, whoa, I don't really need a cell phone, but then you got your first cell phone and now you cannot live without a cell phone. I think that that's what happens with AI. You don't need it until you use it once, right? So what that's gonna do is it's going to transform I think the equivalent to the Industrial Revolution, because a lot of jobs are no longer going to be there. And the way that we are going to relate to people is going to be very different. So in that aspect, I think it's going to be a crash for people that are not mentally able to feel grounded. This is going to crash their reality in terms of not feeling good enough and all that. However, I said that's the bad. And that is going to be even more prevalent on the younger generation that, if you recall from the beginning, is already the one that is feeling the anxiety the most and is feeling the financial pressure the most and is like the less resilient. And that's the generation that is going to have to face the reality of in artificial intelligence. Now, on the other aspect, I do think that it's going to provide access to a lot of service to a lot of people that cannot have access to. So there are mental health bots, there are mental health apps. So if you are in a crisis, there is a severe shortage of qualified therapists, psychologists, and psychiatrists. I think this is going to come, especially because that generation feel more comfortable communicating to a bot or someone online than an actual friend. And the more that they get refined, the faster that it will be to give this immediate access for them to have access to some kind of release. Because crisis, especially suicidal crisis, you have a window, 15 minutes. I need to get you out of that thought for 15 minutes, and I can get you back into it. For that emergency, I think AI is going to be fantastic, but it is changing how we do relationships. Because if you remember, enthusiasm was about connections. AI is going to make connections even that much harder. So how you are going to compete in the workplace with against AI, and I'm going to say against, which I don't think is against, is because you can be creative. AI is going to be based on a lot of stuff, but in order for you to activate that part of your brain, your right hemisphere and all of that, you need to be chill, because nobody is creative when you think that a tiger is following you. So in that aspect, I think I'm giving a very long answer, but we need to increase in mental health, recognize the change, but also recognize that we are no longer being non-useful. We are going to be useful in a different way, which is more right brain, the productivity, the things that cannot be automatized, like things that you don't have to do the same way over and over. So in that aspect, those are all that get released when you don't have levels of stress. Did I answer it?
Yes, I don't think it's long. I think that the concept like is very complex, right? So I wanted to know like you touched this like a little bit, but do you know like some examples of AI applications that are like currently being developed or utilized in this area? Or you said that you use AI, so not sure if you can answer.
Fortunately enough, for mental health. For mental health, I still believe that 101 with person, I think, is the best one. There was I used to have a list. So before I used to work with teenagers, so I remember giving them a list of. I can send you a list. At this moment I don't recall, but I don't think any of the ones I saw I really liked. I was never impressed by any of them, but the last time I checked was like 3 years ago. So probably there are better ones, but yes, there are a few ones that are coming up, but at the top of my head, I cannot think of any. Now, I do think that they're good for the short term. There is a situation I'm feeling like a crisis type of situation, but if you require services, a lot of the effectiveness of the therapeutic relationship is going to be the alliance. Sometimes it's not even how great your therapist is, it's how great do you feel with your therapist. So for that, definitely let's just go back to in person or video or with a human being, because usually if you are in that level of a crisis, you're already feeling very disconnected.
Okay. So we have like room for improvement, but if you consider that would be great. And we have like a lot of opportunities for our members that, you know, could create companies in that industry. So that's very hopeful. So I have like another question in here. It's more regarding to you as like Florida Blue Agency. They say great presentation, and they say as a Florida Blue Agency owner, how do you support the Florida Blue members? And is this support at the Sanitas location virtual or in the location?
So how the program works, so the program is called Be Well, right? So if you're a Florida member, let me just take it back 3 steps of how that works. So if you're a Florida Blue member, you have access to all the Sanitas clinics. So we take Florida Blue, right? So you get your PCP sees you and he says like, okay, you start to say like, well, I have anxiety, I have depression. So they said, why don't you try the Be Well program? So the Be Well program will be that intermediate step between not having any support and having full on therapy. So what you will be working is with a therapist in a one-on-one basis, and let's explore. So they will give you tools, we will give you psychoeducation, we will give you things to get you out of that step. If in the process we say like, whoa, therapy will be awesome for you, then we will move them to therapy, right? But that, it could be both. It could be virtual and it could be in person. Also, they don't pay for it. I mean, it's part of one of the benefits of being part of the Florida Blue. That whole participation with us, with the therapist, you don't get an extra charge, because I know that that's a big concern. It's part of the benefits that you get with Florida Blue.
Okay, understood. That's very good to know. I also have another question that is more from the regulatory side. I don't know if you could answer to that, but you can give us like your perspective on your experience, because I know that you travel so much in different countries. So do you know if there is like some regulations to follow for mental health at work, and how this changes by country? Like we have guidelines for this?
So I think that I mean, they're starting to be more, because it's very expensive. And once you hit someone's budget and pocket, I think people become very alert. Unfortunately, I think the US is the most lax about it. There are no real regulations, or they're like, this is your amount of time. One thing that is becoming more like a cultural regulation more than like an external regulation is a concept that most companies, like big companies in the US, are taking, and I'm going to talk about a little bit. And then the other one is the mental health days. So that's a different category from PTO. So you have this many mental health days that you can, on top of all the other benefits, but it's kind of becoming a non-spoken law where people get mental health days, right? In an attempt to alleviate that. In order to create, the thing is like mental health for a lot of people, and I see it every day in my office, especially with the older crowd, they start and they say, I don't believe in what you do. And I'm like, excellent introduction. Let's see how that goes, right? So the problem, I think 2020 did a lot of things to help regulate the industry, or getting credibility about the industry, but it's still not quite there. So in Europe, yes, they have more regulations, but not because of mental health. It's because the labor associations, especially France, for instance. France is fantastic at creating limited amounts of time that you can be working. The other one that is phenomenal about it, because you can sue the company, is Germany. So you can only contact me within my hours of work. After that, you can be sued if you contact me. And all of these things that have been more the labor, the workforce putting the limits and the boundaries, are impacting mental health. But I don't think anyone has really sat down, and the European, the numbers, which is one, actually the link is a whole mental health in Europe, and what they have is additional programs, but not laws that people have to follow, but additional programs that they will provide to the companies to assist them with mental health, but not in a specific law.
Okay, I understand. Yeah, I also saw that in the news from France. I knew that they were like more innovative, or I would say more advanced in that area. but of course that would be depend on the countries, and it's difficult to establish this kind of regulation. So that one was a hard one, but of course we have to continue working towards that. The other thing, and it was along the lines, like I guess that would depend on the culture and the leadership team, you know. And we have like another question regarding that. They say, what role does your leadership team play in your employees' mental health? Like, I
All
think
of
it's
it.
right.
Mm.
It's gonna be
So all of these programs, and when I was telling you examples from Deloitte and KPMG and Gallup and all of these people, they always start from the bottom up. So and this is going to sound horrible, you only have burnt out if you have an inefficient manager. Efficient managers will never generate burnt out. So that much of an impact has, because a lot of the crisis that you feel, like mental health crisis that you feel at work, is because unclear expectations. So if there is not a good communication of what is expected of me, what are the boundaries, and a clear communication and continuous communication, you are going to generate mental health, because I don't know what's going to happen. One example is clear communication. So managers, all of these programs that I was referring at the beginning, they were always going to come from the top down. You starting to create all these wellness when you don't have a specific systems in place are not going to be that much helpful, because the head is going to still demand things or not being clear about the demand. One example, and I'm going to use this as a story that kind of clears it out, and I'm giving time for Anna to join back. So there was this story, I don't know if it's true or not, but I think is great, when the best employee, like the one that was doing everything extra, resigns, right? The moment that that person that was the start of the game resigns, and you ask them, why did you resign? That's when it changed the game, because that person was giving 300%, thinking that that extra step or extra devotion and all of that was a temporary thing. The moment that you don't realize that that extra thing, that person was giving like 180% because they thought that it was a temporary, and it's not a temporary one anymore, then is when you realize that you have a problem, because you were expecting that person to keep going at that pace. So that tells you the power that managers have. Absolutely, there is no program that is going to work if it doesn't start from the top down. The managers are going to be the ones that implement it, but you also need to give the managers tool to implement it.
We just need to finish in 5 minutes, so I have like the last question, and sorry about that interruption. So the last one would be, and I would say the most important one, how do we minimize the stigma of mental illness, right? Because you mentioned that, you know, it causes like a lot of stress, a lot of people, younger generations, they have these problems. There are a lot of influencers that are opening up about this. We have like a lot of initiatives, but we still have this problem, right? So what else can we do? I would say that would be the last question.
So I'm hopeful that this is on the way down, the stigma about it, because of how many young people I'm seeing at the office, right? So if they can recognize it right away, I need some support. And usually, depending on how young they are, I'm like the second or the third person that they see. So I think that the communication have shifted. The Especially with mental health is going to be education, education, education. Like I see it, for instance, like the program that I was telling you, right? So we have the PCP and the PCP, so we kind of like get into the whole medication very fast, depending on, because we have all the labs, we have all that work accessible to us, right? So that's even like is interesting to see, because if I tell you take this pill because your liver needs it, or your Liver may not be because you know where your liver is, but something like random. I would tell you a part of your organ that you don't even know where it is, but oh, parathyroid. If I tell you where is your parathyroid, you don't even know where that like kind of does. You know the thyroid, but the parathyroid, you are like, what is it? Oh, absolutely no problem. I would take it right away. But with medications for the brain, we kind of have a lot of more concepts that is a lack of us being strong enough to endure it, right? Like we are missing something because you should be able to deal with all this stress on your own. I think the stigma is breaking when you see how many people, if you open up that conversation, if you are sincere among your friends and everything, and you say, how many of you are anxious? And you start to see that you're not the only one, that you have a lot of your friends that are. Obviously, my group of friends, I mean, some of them, we kind of talk about this all the time, but I see it when I'm in a different group of friends. And the moment that you said, oh, I'm a psychotherapist, oh, let me tell you about this, this, this. So I think that there is a recognition of symptoms. It's just that we need to recognize that the same way that our parathyroid needs a medication, sometimes our brains needs a break. And that has nothing to do with your capacity to deal with problems, because what we don't understand is that those are two different parts of your brain. If you live engaged in your limbic brain, there is no capacity to deal with the problem because you don't have the access to that part of your brain that can come up with great ideas. So it's not a lack of you having the energy, it's that that part of your brain is shut down because you are in survival. So we need to get your brain, which is awesome because it's keeping you alive, chilling down a little bit. And the moment that that conversation starts to happen, the more that I think people are going to be opening it up. But it has to happen. It has to start with us, like you being open, like, you know what, I think I have anxiety. I think I have depression. And the more that we get comfortable having those conversations, the more than the stigma is going to go, because who of us right now doesn't have a friend that has something? But
So
it's gonna take a minute.
yeah, we could say that, yeah, we have like a lot of things to improve, but we are like on the right path. We could say that.
Yes.
We have to be hopeful for the future. We are doing the work. So that was like the last question, and I think that
Right.
our time is up, but I wanted to thank you so much, Malu, for your time, for your expertise, and your
Thank you.
presentation. It was very interesting. And thank you all very much for joining this webinar. As I mentioned, you can watch it again and many times you want on our YouTube channel. And you know, I encourage you to visit our website to check out our upcoming webinars. And of course, if you have any questions about Florida Blue, about Sanitas, please contact the emails that we are showing you in the screen. So thank you so much and have a nice day, everyone.
Thank
Excellent.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.